warm welcome to the incoming class. You've made a very wise choice in enrolling at the IFMR GSB at Kriya University. And I'm sure you'll have a terrific time over the next couple of years as you go through what Kriya and IFMR GSB have to offer. And of course, the wonderful strengths that you bring to bear. And I'm sure this will be a memorable time. Of course, you're also a very unique class in that your whole orientation is happening virtually. It's a reflection of the strange and surreal times that we live in, but it makes you actually unique and special as well. So I would very much see this as a real opportunity and not a crisis or a shortcoming, and would encourage you to see it that way as well. What I thought I would do today is maybe talk a little bit about how I see the world sort of unfolding in the months and years to come. And then, coming out of that, maybe a few lessons for you as you embark on this important chapter of your professional lives in getting a business degree. So I thought that's what I would do. And maybe I'll take about, 20 or so minutes to do that. And then I'm very much looking forward to hearing your questions, hearing any views or opinions you have, and to having a very interactive session over the subsequent hour or so. So, as I said, these are very strange and surreal times. It's a situation that I think we know very little around, and we are learning as we go along. This is what I think, is referred to as an unknown unknown. We don't know what causes this complication, and we don't know what the solution to the complication is as well. And so this is, as we are enduring it, it seems quite painful. But I'm sure as we reflect on it several years from now, we will see this as a very interesting time, and it will surely be documented in our history as a very important period when humanity came together, we did things to help each other, and actually collectively come out of the crisis that we are in. But as I look at the next sort of several years, I see three distinct phases by which I think through which we will emerge. The first phase is what I would call sort of an uncertain and unstable phase, and which will last anywhere from, it could be as little as 6 months if we are lucky, to it could be as much as 18 months if you're not able to, for example, figure out a vaccine or a cure in a meaningful period of time. So there's a first phase of uncertainty and instability. I think that will be followed by 2 or 3 years of truly recovery and rebuilding. A lot of the momentum and rebuilding of, in our country, the infrastructure and the reform process that has been unleashed. So there's a 2, perhaps 3 years of recovery and reform that I see happening. And then I think the period after that, you can take whether it's 5 years, 10 years, as the case might be, is I think India reclaiming our glory, reclaiming our rightful position in the world stage. And I'm pretty sure that in the subsequent period of 5 to 10 years, let's say by 2030 or 2035, we will clearly have established that position with very little doubt in my mind at this point. And so as you sort of embark on this important chapter, I think it's helpful for you to understand how the world is likely to unfold, at least from my sort of humble vantage point. And I would very much encourage you to draw optimism, positivity, and a lot of confidence as you navigate the times to come. Because the first portion of the period, I think, will be quite instructive and learning, simply because all of us are learning. In normal circumstances, all of us would have felt like we knew things, and you'd be exposed to newer concepts, newer topics, and so forth, and it would feel like you guys are learning and the rest of us, in some sense, are done learning. But I think this next phase of the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to have joint learning through all of us, right? So in many ways, that makes you a very unique class and a very special class, and I would urge you never ever to forget that distinction that you've earned. So the next sort of 6 to 12 to maybe 18 months, as I said, depending on how the cure or the prevention for the pandemic pans out, we will see uncertainty, we will see instability. I mean, if we believe that very quickly this virus is going to disappear, I think the answer is a clear no by now, right? We were hoping that we would lock down, and at the end of the lockdown, miraculously, the virus would have disappeared. Heat would have helped us. We would have, been disciplined in some sense, and the virus would have gone away. But I don't think that's happening for several months, if not years to come. And frankly, even beyond, I think we will expect and should expect every 3 years or so a new form of virus. I mean, if you just look back, I mean, we had the SARS virus, we had the MERS virus, we had the Nipah virus. So I think nature has a way of throwing challenges at us, and this notion of a coronavirus absolutely will keep coming back to us in different shapes and forms. It may have different origins, but I think as a humanity, we should gear up to deal with these kinds of pandemics that will come at a reasonable regularity. And therefore, virus isn't going away, which will create uncertainty. Do we wear masks? Do we socially distance? At what point is it okay to shake hands? At what point is it okay to go to a restaurant or a movie theater or a mall? We'll have to figure out, and that's some level of uncertainty. The instability, I think, comes from, as things spike, which they will, we will have to perhaps lock down again, enforce many more restrictions on our people, and that creates some level of instability. Like in Chennai, for example, we went through a fairly protracted sort of lockdown. Then we reopened for a couple of weeks, and then again we've had a couple of weeks of lockdown, right? And hopefully, starting tomorrow, the lockdown will lift, and in a partial way, many of us will begin to resume our activities. But what these intermittent lockdowns do is it creates some level of instability. And so, for example, even though lockdown ends tonight and sort of the reopening happens tomorrow, our offices are not going to be ready to have us back in, right? They need a day or two to actually sanitize, get the safety and hygiene infrastructure up and running, which means, our plans have to get moved accordingly. If it happens in a day, then we're back day after. But if it takes a couple of days, then we will be back only by the middle of the week. Older folks in our office, for example, still won't come to the office. And therefore, progress in terms of advancing our business will take an automatic sort of slowdown, right? And so these periods of lockdown and restart create some level of instability. And for sure, based on the experience in the US and other markets, we've seen sort of the wave 1 come down under control, and then wave 2 has begun. And so I fully expect us, even though we've made good progress, I expect that we haven't yet peaked and we haven't yet flattened the curve. But as we do that over the next few weeks, it's very likely that in a few months' time, a wave 2 will come, and wave 2 will come with its own sets of complications, as I'm sure the virus will also adapt, right? So till we find a vaccine or a cure, I think we'll be going through these waves of, sort of us getting on top of the current spread, resuming life, and then the spread picking up and us having to halt life. So this uncertainty, instability phase, could last 6 months if we're very quick about finding a vaccine. And yesterday, the ICMR has issued instructions to one of our leading vaccine manufacturers that by August 15th, they should try and get a vaccine ready. Now, that does feel a little bit like wishful thinking, but if it happens, it's great news, right? Vaccine is developed. If it is actually effective and works well, then I think we can accelerate the process of returning back to normalcy and getting back to what life pre-COVID looked like. But very likely, this will be perhaps not as effective, or more tests will be required and so forth, and therefore it will get delayed. And therefore, my characterization of the 6 to 12 month or 18-month period as being both uncertain and unstable as we go through these days. But for sure, we will crack this, right? I mean, as humanity, what we've shown time and again, and there's a long track record of dealing with these kinds of complexities, we will find a solution and we will come out of this. And so I remain quite optimistic that as a human race, we will figure this out, and life will come back to somewhat of the variety we saw before this COVID hit us. Perhaps in, as I said, 18 months' time for sure, we should be back to normal. To me, the period after that is quite interesting. There is a 2 to 3 year period when we will actually sort of recover and rebuild. What do I mean by recover? I think demand in the real sort of unfettered sense will come back. Right now, demand is actually quite constrained to bare essentials and necessities, right? No one is thinking about luxury items. No one is thinking about upgrading their cars. No one is thinking about upgrading their phones. If the phone conks off, then they look for a phone because they see that as an essential. No one is going out and buying apparel. No one's looking for the next cool perfume or hair gel and so forth. We're very much focused on food, on rations, water, milk, so on and so forth, right? So this is our current sort of need, but that demand will surely recover. The need to entertain ourselves, the need to consume, the need to indulge in some luxuries will come back. And that recovery, I think, will take a 2 to 3 year period. And the reason I say that is when I look back at the global credit crisis that we went through back in 2008, and if you looked at the behavior of the Indian consumer, literally the year after, by 2009, our savings to GDP had actually peaked quite a bit, and there was a flight towards savings and lowering consumption. And it took literally a 3 year period for the consumption to GDP to recover back to the pre-crisis levels. So I think as human beings, we will tend to conserve and save and prepare for the rainy day. But as we get comfortable, get back to normality, a little bit of the recovery of demand will come, and we will begin to spend. Alongside this, I also see a period of rebuilding, where we will rebuild, the infrastructure that in some sense has gotten stalled because of the lockdown and this uncertainty. And a lot of the reform process that has been unleashed by the government, I think will build momentum. So we will actually rebuild the country in that sense of the word, right? And for example, the government, I think, has quite sensibly chosen to take a big shot at the agriculture space just now. I mean, as you know, just a few weeks ago, the Essentials Commodities Act was denotified. The APMC, the Agriculture Produce Marketing Commission infrastructure has been brought down, which is a monopoly that bought and sold agri-produce. And these are very massive changes to the whole agriculture space. I mean, agriculture accounts for about 10% of our GDP, but about 50% of the country works in the agri space. So it's a fairly large percentage of the population that relies on the agri world. What has now happened as a result of this major reform, in my view, is that the agri supply chains have opened up to broad scale participation, both by the private sector, but also foreign players that want to come in. And I surely see a period of formalization and financialization of the agri space. Now the farmer can sell to pretty much anybody in the country. It's not just the local mandi and the APMC that he has to go sell at a predetermined price. He has the choice on where, how much, and at what price he will sell, which creates the forces of free market to unleash. Naturally, what will end up happening is bulk storage infrastructure will increase, which means we'll begin to see massive silos in which food grains, oil seeds, pulses, and so forth can get stored. And the logistical and supply chain and transportation infrastructure will unleash on the back of that, as people that put these storage facilities then work on the network of infrastructure that's built to transport a lot of the agricultural produce, which is, I think, how most mature markets operate today. And I see that period of infrastructure building around agriculture sort of happening over the next 2 to 3 years once we resume to normalcy. And the agri is just one example, right? There are multiple sectors where similar types of reforms have been introduced. And we will see activity picking up on all these over the next 2 to 3 year period. Also, from a political standpoint, I think this 3 year period is quite interesting because this government comes up for elections in 2024. And clearly they will want yet another shot at another administration, right? And so it's also in their sort of political interest to ensure that a lot of plans, reforms, and the rebuilding of the country actually happens and is fast-tracked before 2024, so that when they go to the polls, they can actually talk about all the major changes they've done, the kind of infrastructure projects that have been commissioned and are up and running, the kind of economic growth that has been unleashed, the kind of poverty alleviation that they've delivered. So I see, therefore, a lot of political sense as well that the next 2 to 3 years will see a lot of fairly frenetic economic as well as rebuilding activity of the country's infrastructure happening. And in particular, I'm sure you all know that there's a 100 lakh crore infrastructure plan blueprint that has been laid out. Again, just to reiterate, it's 100 lakh crores. I mean, the magnitudes of our outlays have reached such a big scale now that we don't talk about simply lakhs and crores, but we talk about lakhs of crores. So this is a 100 lakh crore outlay over a 5 year period on the infrastructure side, from roads to ports to airports to inland waterways to the Sagarmala project around the coastline. There's a whole host, railways, there's a whole host of infrastructure development that is planned for, all of which I fully expect that once we return to normalcy, the commissioning of these projects will begin, spends will happen, which means jobs get created. And jobs getting created means people get paid. People get paid means people get consumed. And if people consume, the economy, broader real economy lifts up. And that's the reason why I feel once this 6 to 18 months period of uncertainty and instability sort of plays out, a lot of these reforms will be ready to take off. And a 2 to 3 year period after that will see sort of this recovery of demand and rebuilding of the nation beginning to kickstart. Beyond that, if I look at the subsequent 5 years, imagine, 2025 to 2030 or 2035, the 5 to 10 year period beyond that, I am a huge optimist as far as India is concerned. I see three major long-term forces that are happening, right? We are, as a country, perhaps the only country that's getting younger every year, which means our median age is is coming down, right? Our median age is probably now, 27 or 28 or 30 or something like that. It's in that range. Most other countries in the world, including China and Russia, are beginning to age, right? Which means their median age is beginning to increase. We, on the other hand, will continue to remain young and will remain young for a foreseeable period. At least until 2040, I think our median age will not go beyond 35, right? We will be in that 30 to 35 range, which represents a very young and productive population. So that's one big factor. Second, I see the technological disruption and adoption of technology in the country being at, we've never had this pace of technology proliferation and technology adoption in the country, right? I mean, when I grew up, there was, of course, we had to stand in line to even get a telephone call to happen. It's interstate or intercity call. We had to do these trunk calls where you had to wait in line for the call to get connected. Sometimes there's a predefined time slot that's given to you. And that's literally about 30 years ago or 25 years ago. That was the state of play. But now you see the kind of proliferation of mobile data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT. There's a whole bunch of technology that has been adopted and is proliferating at an unprecedented pace. When young people get technology in their hands and they adapt and adopt that technology, magic happens. But there's a third factor that's happening simultaneously, right? This young and tech-savvy population is also willing to take risks, has bold ambitions, and is prepared to try new things, right? And hence the Sachin Bansals and the Mukesh Bansals and so forth of the world, right? Who are coming out, the Vijay Shekhar Sharmas of the world, who at a fairly young age are beginning to dream big dreams and make things happen. So when these three factors come together, a young population with incredible levels of technological proliferation and adoption, combined with a willingness to take risks and try new things, I think, and bold ambitions, more importantly, I think when those three things come together, really magic happens. And I don't think any other country has seen the confluence of these three factors come together at any time in our history as a human race, right? I think India will be a very special situation where that is happening. Now, when you put those three things together, the period after that, now whether it's 5 years or 10 years, as I said, is a matter of detail. We are a democracy that has, embraced capitalism, subsequent to embracing democracy, and that creates complications, right? And so our pace of growth tends to be, in some ways, a function of how the democracy works. And we are still a fairly young democracy, and therefore, every 2 steps we take, we have to take half a step or a step back, simply given that we've embraced democracy as a form of sort of our society. Every other country, by the way, embraced capitalism when it was actually a monarchy, a theocracy, or an autocracy. In other words, there was either a king or a dictator or a sort of a theocratic government that existed. There was no democracy. Capitalism was in place. This is true of the US. This is true of the Western Europe. It's true of most other countries. In fact, I would say all countries in the world, right? We are the only country where we adopted democracy and capitalism came 50 years or 60 years later, right? And we did adopt a socialist approach to our economic activity, state controlled and state run. But starting 91, we embraced very much a free markets capitalism. But democracy had come back in 1947. And that sequence creates a little bit of complication for us. And that's why whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 15 years is a reflection of how those two gel together. But regardless, in my lifetime and in the peak of your careers, in your careers, you have another 30, 35 years minimally ahead of you, right? So for sure, in that period, you're going to see India as a superpower. We will be not just a overall large economy, but we will also be a rich economy. Today, we are a large economy, but we are a poor economy. in that individual per capita income still is at the $1,800 to $2,000 mark, right? And when you get to that $5,000 plus per capita income level is when we become sort of a middle income. And as you get to the $10,000 per capita level, you become a rich or a approaching rich kind of country. So we are a large economy today, but poor. But in your lifetime, you will see us as a very large economy and as a rich economy as well, where per capita incomes will get north of $15,000, $20,000, maybe even more, depending on how things accelerate. So therefore, if I were to pull all of this together, there is, a phase over the next 6 to 18 months, again, depending on how the cure or the vaccine development happens, when we will have uncertainty and instability that we'll have to grapple with. To my mind, that will build our character as a human race. And for you, it will be a great way to learn with everybody together in society. There is a subsequent 2 to 3 year phase when we will see demand recovery in a very significant way and rebuilding of the nation that will unfold in a very, very significant way. And the period after that, which is by when you will be assuming sort of meaningful roles in industry or academia or wherever you choose to spend your time, in the next 5 to 7 years, you'll have reached a certain level of experience, maturity, and seniority. That's when we will see significant explosion of prosperity in our country. And you will be not just a participant, but in many ways, you will preside over that prosperity period. And therefore, for sure, I feel your class in particular that is joining now and your generation in terms of that 5 to 10 year cohort of individuals will actually shape the destiny of our country. Right? And you should take great pride and see that as a very major responsibility. So that's how I see a little bit coming out of this pandemic, but looking at the medium to long term, how the journey sort of plays out. I have specifically sort of 5 lessons that I want to leave with you to think about and embrace if you feel is appropriate. The first I would say is this is a great chance for you to learn. Learn greedily, learn as much as you can. I mean, obviously the IFMR GSB will throw a whole bunch of resources, content, professors, other resources for you to learn and grow. But what has happened now in the world is everything is open as far as education is concerned. So depending on what your areas of interest are, you could literally pick up knowledge and content and instruction from a whole host of people around the world. So learn very greedily, soak up as much as you can. Think of yourself as a sponge, right? That just wants to take in as much knowledge as possible. You should also recognize that this is the safest place to be at this time. Being in an educational institution and studying is the best way to spend your time. Because if you're in a job, as I am, high degree of uncertainty, I don't know how easy it is going to be to conduct business. I don't know how easy it is to conduct meetings, to do performance appraisals, to meet customers. All that is very hard, and therefore we are figuring it out. You, on the other hand, have chosen to be in an educational system for the next couple of years. I'd say it's a great opportunity just to learn very quickly. That's my first lesson. Second, I would say keep a very optimistic mind. Obviously there is some level of gloom as we look at this uncertainty, but you have a 2-year runway where by when I think things will actually normalize and the recovery will actually happen. So I would very much urge you to keep a positive frame of mind regardless of what may be going around us. As I said, the wave 2s and wave 3s might come, but don't lose heart. That's part and parcel, and we know it. Now it's becoming a sort of known unknown, right? So keep a very optimistic frame of mind. Third, I would say, stand up for what you believe in. It might be something around technology, it might be something around finance, it might be something around supply chain, and it might be around, sort of your own beliefs, right? Core beliefs. Just stick to those, because that conviction is what I think will allow you to really flourish, both at IFMR GSB, but also beyond. So stand up for what you believe in. That's the third lesson I would leave with you. Fourth, take risks. Nothing ever comes out of not taking risks and taking the safe path. As I said, your future and the country's future is actually quite robust as I look at the next 5, 10, 15 years, right? And therefore now is a good chance, an opportunity for you to take some risks. Now, this might be risks with what you study. It might be risks with how you approach a certain subject. It might be risks with how you think about your post-MBA sort of life experience. So there's a number of levels of risk taking. But in general, I would encourage you to take more risks than be conservative at this point. because, frankly, there isn't nothing much to lose at this stage. There's in fact everything to gain. And in general, in periods like this, the more risks one takes, the more rewards one can expect to experience. So I would very much encourage you to take risks. And the last fifth point I would say is, this is a good chance to also clarify your own values. When I grew up in an environment of scarcity, and therefore, there was very limited resources, and we had to compete with one another to grab those scarce resources. Have grown up and will see plenty of prosperity, and therefore the kinds of challenges that I faced when I was in your shoes and that you face now are substantially different. For me, it was very much, do I have to pay a bribe? Do I have to cut the line? Do I have to sort of jump the traffic light or what have you? So I was faced with a lot of right was wrong, right? The other side was wrong. That was the dilemma I had to grapple with. And now the answer to that is blatantly obvious, right? If it is wrong, just don't do it. Don't pay the bribe. Don't jump the red light. Don't violate the law. Don't fudge your expense report. I mean, it's very, very clear. You, on the other hand, are going to be faced with slightly different kinds of dilemmas. For you will be faced with right versus right dilemmas. Both sides of the equation will be right. And how are you going to resolve it? It's not an easy yes or no or one way or the other kind of answer. Right? So, for example, think about truth versus loyalty. If one of your most loyal friends lies to you, what do? Do you privilege loyalty? I've known this person, he's been with me and a support for say 10 or 15 years, and therefore I let the lying slide? Or do you say, hey, truth is very important to me, and therefore I don't care for this loyalty of this friend, I'd rather go with the truth and potentially cut him or her off, or whatever consequences you think are appropriate. Right? You're going to be dealt with these kinds of dilemmas: right versus right, truth versus loyalty, justice versus mercy. You'll be faced with employees that you will supervise in due course, who you'll have to fire because of non-performance. They will have families. They will have loved ones to take care of. Yet you will have responsibility and accountability to deliver a certain set of outcomes, which this individual is not meeting up to. So do you do the fair and just thing, which is to let the person go? Or do you do the merciful thing to keep them on for another 6 months or 1 year or 2 years, even if it is a loss to yourself and to the company? And so there are these kinds of dilemmas that I think you will be faced more and more of compared to what I faced when I was in your shoes, right? And therefore, the only way to clarify this is to be clear about your own values. If truth is a value that you cherish, then it becomes a lot easier to make the choice between truth and loyalty. If mercy, compassion is a very core value of yours, then that justice versus mercy becomes a little bit easier for you to make the decision around, right? And so this is a good time also to have conversations with people around you who are going through similar sort of challenges in life, to really clarify, what your values are. Of course, you'll have to sync this up as you get into the real world with the institutional values, and there should be a good sort of resonance between your values and the institutional values. But having clarity on your values certainly helps. When I was in business school at roughly your age, maybe 25 years ago, values was the last thing I was thinking about. But when I look back now, I wish I had clarified a lot of my values when I was there. Because subsequent to that, I never got a peer set with whom I could be free, I could be comfortable, I could chat, quite expansively about any topic. So you do have a very special opportunity now to clarify your values. So 5 lessons very quickly again: learn as much as you can, keep a very optimistic frame of mind, stand up for what you believe in, take risks, and clarify your values. In closing, I would say you've made a very wise choice to come to business school at this point in time. As I said, you're a very unique class and will have a unique set of experiences as a result of being that unique class. Go forth and have a wonderful time. I wish you the very best.